Hey everyone, this is part 4 and it's the last part of our scope introduction. So we're going to debug a function that takes in an array of strings representing words in a sentence. This function should iterate over the input array and should create and return a resulting sentence from the words therein. Below is an example of the code running, assuming that you will have debugged the described function createSentence. So here's our function, likely to have several errors, and here are our test cases. So the first thing that we're going to do is run the function just to see what happens. And we get a syntax error, unexpected token ending curly brace, and it looks like it's pointing to line 14. So we go to line 14 and it's like, that looks pretty good to me. It's got our opening curly brace and closing curly brace, which brings up an important point. Chances are, if you get an unexpected token closing curly brace that's on a line that looks correct, we're missing an opening curly brace somewhere else. Conversely, if you get an unexpected end of input, like line, and there's only 20 lines and you get end of input line like 50, it's usually because you're missing a closing curly brace. So just keep that in mind. With that, let's go ahead and start from the top. So this one, the code is telling us that it matches with this one right here. So that means that one of these is missing an opening curly brace. Our for loop has one, our if statement does not have one. So let's go ahead and put one there. So that's lined up there, now that's lined up there, and that's lined up there. So at least now the function should, do something. We should say it doesn't do something. We should say there aren't going to be any obvious like, hey, I can't even run this function, there are so many errors. So here's the idea. It says undefined because we're not returning anything. So let's jump down here to where our return statement should be, and we're actually getting ahead of ourselves. The first thing that we ought to see is up at the very top. This is a global variable. We've created it outside of our function and then used it inside of our function, which is not a good idea. You might consider that these are global variables, but we're not going to consider that a global variable, mostly because we're not using it anywhere other than right where it was created. And we assume that what's happening in this entire scope here is kind of all the same environment. So result 1 and result 2 are not global variables the same way sentence is a global variable. Because mainly in this context, global is referring to creating a variable outside of a function and then making use of it inside of that function. So let's go ahead and move our global variable inside of our function. Now let's write some pseudocode. So create a result sentence, start as empty string. Then at the very end, we want to return our result sentence. And immediately we've identified a possible source of the error. Contamination. We've identified a possible source of the error. So we are saying sentence, but we want to say return sentence. So cool. Let's go ahead and keep writing pseudocode. We'll say iterate over the words array. And that makes sense, right? We have a sentence variable, starts as empty. We want to iterate over the words array, add the words in, plus a space, and then a period at the end. So we've got this if statement. If I triple equals words dot length minus 1, sentence. Okay. I think I get what's going on here. I think they're saying when the index variable is at its last value, add a period to the sentence. Okay. So let's run and see what this is currently doing to possibly get a better idea. So I am worth it, period. I am worth it, space, period. So the problem now is that we're adding a space after every word when we probably shouldn't be adding this space if it's the last value. So let's move this over. And what I'm going to say is get rid of this. I'll say move this around. So if index variable is at last value, add a period to the end of the sentence. Which means that, do we really want to be doing this every time? And I would say no. We probably don't want to do that every time because we're adding a space after the last word and we shouldn't. So what that means is that I would suggest that every other case is when we would want to. So otherwise, come on, add current word and a space. So the thing that's going to happen here, though, is that if we move this to the else portion, it might change the code in unexpected ways. So the first thing that we're going to do is move it And the second thing that we're going to do is run our newly created function to see what happened. So now we're not adding the last word. We have I am worth it period and then I am worth space period, which is not ideal. So what this means is that, first let's get rid of all this blank space because we don't need it anymore. So if index variable is at last value, add a space to the end of the sentence. Otherwise, add current word and a space. So we're adding the current word at every index except for when I is equal to words.length minus 1. So all that means is that instead of just adding a period to the end of the sentence, we need to add a word, add current word and a period to the end of the sentence. So current word is just going to be words at I plus our period. Otherwise, we're adding the current word plus a space. So with that, I believe that that should sort out the function. Let's run it and make sure. Looking good. Let's go ahead and take this function and paste it back into the input window. Run our tests, and we're in good shape. So that's it for now for debugging, which will probably not be the last time you debug, but brief introduction to scope, how we can organize our variables, and some certain things to avoid. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.